Hello and welcome to another live demonstration. Today I want to talk to you about Daler Rowney Aquafine Gouache. I think a few weeks ago I showed you the Aquafine inks. So this is the Aquafine Gouache. What they've done is they've increased their very popular Aquafine range and added gouache and watercolour inks to this very popular range. So gouache is not an overly popular medium. It's great for mixed media, but it is actually a really nice medium to work from. A lot of the reason for gouache not being overly popular is some of the colours can be not very light fast. But I've looked at the colour chart in the Aquafine range, and all of the colours have at least a 3-star, if not a 4-star rating. So they're very good, highly light fast, which is great. Like I say, modern technology has moved on, and now we can make a paint which previously was quite frugal, quite light fast. So gouache used when it was manufactured, it's been around for centuries, if not one of the earliest types of paint. So pigment, gum arabic, and then what they call a body, which is usually white pigment or chalk, which makes the colour opaque. Opaque means good covering power. They're often called an opaque watercolour, which is quite a good description, but they're also compared to an acrylic because of the way you can work with them. But I actually think they stand alone in their own little band. They do work very much like a watercolour, but their opaque qualities are great, very much like an acrylic, so you can build up your layers. Designer gouache was designed for designers to do their illustrations, and then the original painting was in a drawer, which is why the light fast properties weren't very good, and all the image was then put on posters, which didn't give any light fast properties. But now artists like this medium, so of course looking at light fast properties is important for artists who want to display their work. So you'll see you can also have fun. This is a bit of an offcut of mount board, or matte board in America. You can use a lovely background colour because of the opaqueness of the paint. And I'm going to paint, I don't know, like I say, it has its own qualities. So I'm not going to dilute and keep it very dilute like you would watercolour. I'm going to paint very much more like an acrylic, but it's rewettable. I can go back in, I can move, I can lift, I can keep the paint on my palette and go back in. So first thing I'm going to do is just put a wash of colour down. The colours I've chosen are from the range, and all I've done is chosen a good basic range of red, yellow, blue, white, which is a gouache paint you're probably very familiar with if you're a watercolour artist, because what you do is you'll use gouache as your final highlights and touches and those little sparkles that you want to add back. So I'm sure a lot of watercolour artists will have used gouache at some point. So all I'm doing for me is I am just mapping. I just want to decide on the way the feathers go. So they go up and over the head here. And what I did find is I tend to do a lot more layering, a little bit more careful. So I've made sure I've picked up a nice big brush just to stop myself getting very detailed and very controlled. I want to let the brush strokes just give the story. So you can see there how even just using this brush, it's created that texture of feathers. So just blocking out. What this does is, for me, just makes it less scary, a little bit less intimidating, because I have a plan. Not always a good plan, but it just gives me an idea of where the colours are, the direction of the feathers and stops it being that scary blank area. I mean, a lot of these colours I know I'm going to go over. I can wash over. Just adding some lights just where I want it to be a little lighter. The front of the head is a lot lighter. So this is a synthetic brush which we use for watercolour, and I like it for the gouache because it just gives me that control, but also those brush strokes. Okay, so what I'm also doing is I'm not getting the paint very wet. I'm keeping it quite thick because I want to use that opaque quality. I need to wet my brush to give me some movement, otherwise it feels quite sticky, like a drying acrylic. So I'm going to start with the beak. I haven't got black, purposely, because you don't always need it. So a bit of the burnt umber and a bit of the blue, and maybe a little touch of white. And I do find I use the white quite often just to tone down my colours. So with gouache, you can make watercolours into a type of gouache by just adding white. But what that will do is dilute your colour, so you won't get that lovely red, you'll get a pink. But it'll be an opaque pink. So that's the great thing about using gouache, is the colours are strong and vibrant, but in that opaque form. So just, what I'm struggling with is the light, so I might need to stand back. I can't actually see the light, the shape at the moment. So just picking up different colours with my brush, and this is why I have a messy palette, because I just pick up colour as and when I feel I need it. So I'm having to stand back so I can see. What I do know is I can go back in, I can go back in, I can go back over, I can adjust, I can alter. So it's quite fun just to see what happens, to put the colour on. And then,
sorry, Anita, should we
yes,
put, a couple of shout outs?
You can do, yes.
Brian's just asked if we are live, so let's just prove that we are
Yes,
live.
Brian, we're live.
So say hello to Brian. We've also got Rania who's watching.
Hello, Brian and Rania.
And Kevin.
And Kevin. Okay, so yes, we are live for you. You can watch this as a catch-up at a later date, but we like to film the initial demonstrations live. So welcome to all those people who are watching. Okay. I'm going to move on because I'm fiddling with that. And different mediums, because people say, what's your favourite medium? Or I always work in this medium. And it's really difficult for me to say what my favourite medium is, because my job is to try lots of mediums. So I have a favourite medium sometimes at the time, and then they say, what's your style? And honestly, my style changes with the medium. The medium dictates how it's going to turn out. So normally, with a watercolour, I'm quite loose, let the paint flood and the paper do its magic, let the paint shift on the water. But with gouache, because I know I can do this layering and I can get detail down, it just seems to control how I use it. So don't worry about finding a style or finding a way of working. Just let the medium take you where it's going to go. I know I can say that easily, but I really do. So each painting just looks a little bit different, and I worried about having a style. In the end, I just went and did what I liked. Okay, so just putting the colour down, I'm going to go in, and as I've got this black, I'm going to start and do the eye. So not using black, but a mixture of the ultramarine blue and the burnt umber. Okay, just putting the eye in. It just starts to give you those features you're looking for. So I want the eyes quite brown. So I don't think the burnt umber is brown enough. I'm going to mix it with a touch of the red. It's too red. Like I say, I like to keep a limited palette, just because you can get so many colours from just the few colours you have. Let's just put this on. It may not be the colour I want at the moment, but I can go back over. I can alter and change. Again, like I say, I can't actually see the colour going on all that easily unless I stand back. So that looks a bit too stark at the moment. So another thing about gouache is the ability to put the colour on very flat. So you can give a really good flat colour. So again, it's something different to watercolour where the pigments will granulate and change. So use alongside watercolour, but can be used on its own to give you those wonderful posters, that really flat, stylised kind of work. There will have been done with gouache. But gouache, like I have said before, has been around centuries, if not millennia. It's one of the first painting mediums with this opaque qualities. Dürer, he used gouache. So did a lot of the watercolour artists because of the qualities and the lovely opaqueness of the paint and the detail you can get. Right, I'm losing that, so I'm going to just take that. Okay, I'm going to pick up some detail and start to move on. Else I'll just be here touching and playing forever. So this is tiny little feathers on the beak, a lot darker here.
Anita?
Yes.
I have a question.
Okay.
From Kevin.
Kevin?
Kevin would like to know, can you let the gouache dry in pans like watercolour and then re-wet it with no fuss, or is it best to use it out of the tube each time?
To be honest, it's better to use it out of the tube each time. You won't find, I think I actually did, but you normally won't find gouache in pans. The reason being, because of the binders that have been used, it will often dry and it'll crack. And it actually makes it a little bit more difficult to regenerate. It's difficult to get the paint to move again. Doesn't mean you can't, and I'm sure a lot of people have had success in doing so, but I've always found gouache dries too hard to be able to get the colour. You can get it, but it's quite difficult. So you will often find gouache in tubes. And if you're tight like me, you'd let it dry on and you will reuse it. But the opaqueness and the beautiful quality you get fresh from that tube rather than having to use a lot of water to reactivate the colour. So, you know, try it, find out, but I think you'll find using the wet paint gives you that really nice opaque quality. Okay. Again, just adding colour. Stand back. The eye needs to dry before I start to fiddle with it. So I'm going to use some of that black. I do find, because I'm using the paint very neat, I do tend to need to mix a little bit more than I had. Too small. I'm going to go with my bigger brush, so a lot more colour. Blue. Very gently, I'm just going to follow the direction, and I can see the feathers going. I'm really very gently just holding this quite large brush, purposely. One, I know it works because I've tried it, but two, just to show you that you don't always need such a small brush. And I do find people tend to gravitate towards a small brush. Maybe it's just something they feel that they can use easier, or it's going to be better to control. And actually, they will find it a little bit more difficult to move. So holding the brush, and I'm using my wrist just to control it a little bit. Just adding some of these details on the top of the head. Now this is a Galapagos hawk. A photograph, a lovely photograph from my very dear friend who had the great luxury of going to the Galapagos Islands. So this is great for me because it means I have plenty of really nice images to work with. The Galapagos hawk, what can I tell you? As always, I've done a little bit of research. The female is the bigger of the hawk, and the Galapagos Islands is made up of different islands, and the hawks can actually vary in size depending on which island they're on. I thought it was really interesting the way that they hunt. So they eat insects, they eat iguanas, they'll eat carcasses, so the crabs on the beach. But what they do is they work in either pairs or in threes, and they fly up and search around for any carrion or any prey. And then when the lead bird has seen any, it will signal to the others and they'll work as a team. So that was a really interesting thing I saw about these birds. And just that the Galapagos Island, well known for their distinctive characteristics, where the animals held with Darwin's theory of evolution, and how the same kind of species will have different adaptations depending on their environment. And the same with these hawks, with them being different sizes depending on the environment that they're in, which I thought was really interesting. Let me stand back. So I'm just thinking about where I'm going to go next. Let me pick up a bit of yellow. What I want to do is get as much down as possible, have a short break, and then come back and just finish with detail. And with this, you'll see I'm jumping around. I try not to. I keep thinking maybe I could do that bit, but I am jumping around because I just like to pick up and get things done. Like, my brush is a bit too contaminated with the yellow. Let's go in with the white, and this same brush, just pick up some of the white, because the top of the head's also quite white. And then the beak has some white. So I'm just layering. I know I can go back in. I know I can push the colours forward by adding white on top. This is the beauty of it. I can work with the light colours on top, and I can go back in. Very much like an acrylic, but if I want it to have a little bit more characteristic of a watercolour, I can make it quite wet. Brush is splaying, mostly because it's quite wet. I'm going to use that. So you see how my brush is splaying here? This is because it's a little bit wet. Dry, sorry, I meant dry. Because of the way I'm using the paint, I'm not using it very wet, but I'm going to use that, especially in the bird's feathers. So when this brush is very wet, I can keep a lovely point, but because I'm using very neat paint, it's getting a little bit more like a rake brush, so the hairs are splitting. And I'm going to just use that. I think this is coming on okay. And a lot of it is I'm just looking at the colours. Right, I'm going to work on the under the chin, and then I think possibly once I've done that, worked on a little bit of this area here, we'll have a break. It'll give me a chance to walk away or to stop. And I was only saying to Gary, and Gary was being a little sarcastic.
Me?
Yes, you. That I did this image before because I needed to know what colours I wanted. I needed to know how it worked. I needed to know the timing. So there's lots of reasons why I would have tried this. And I didn't like it when I'd finished. I thought it looked rubbish. But I did it yesterday. So I've come in again today and I've just said to Gary, actually, that's not as bad as I thought. It looks quite good. And he goes, why? Because you've walked away. It really is. It's a difficult thing to do. It's to just walk away from your work when you're in the middle or in the flow. But it is really important. It really does help with your frustration. You know, you keep going and you keep saying, oh, I don't like it. It stops you overworking. So if you can't walk away, have 2 or 3 pieces on the go. And then you can swap and change and move around. I'm going to use this brush. So see there how I can just dab this brush and how it's given some wonderful effects. What I'm missing is some kitchen towel. This is what I've not had. I need to clean my brush. So now I can go back in and work dark. Again, look at just details here. It's a lot darker, giving it a little bit of a frowny look, I would say. Just using this brush. I'm just constantly thinking about what fits onto what. So the beak fits on here and it comes back. So I'm just making sure everything fits together. And then there's a much darker area under here. And my brush is a little bit too fine that way, so just turn it round this way to give a little bit more texture. And I know I've said this before, but just changing the way you hold your brush can give you so many different shapes. So doing that gives me a really fine line, but it wasn't the right direction. So just pick up this way. And it doesn't mean I've finished. There's plenty of time to go back in and layer. This is the great thing about gouache, you're just able to layer. But I know if I had areas I didn't like, I can usually lift off quite well. Just thinking about shapes. So under here, the feathers are a little bit more spiky and shaped. I want to bring back
Anita,
Yes.
sorry, quick question from Brenda.
Yes.
Brenda wants to know, do they dry at the same rate as
Yep,
watercolour?
they do. They're drying now. This bit is dried quite quick. You're not using as much water, drying quite quickly. It's almost dried, to be honest, when I'm putting it. They will dry. How quickly they'll dry, but I'm not using a lot of water, so they're drying fairly rapidly. Like I say, I can't actually see hugely. I think that looks quite effective.
Looks like a bird.
It looks like a bird. It looks like a bird. That's better than saying it looks like a fish. Okay, so I think I can feel myself overthinking. So we'll have a short break, and I'll have a chance to look, review, and come back, and then we'll get on with the body and a little bit more detail. Okay, join me in a minute.
Let us bring out the artist in you. If you'd like to learn how to paint or improve your painting, the SAA is here to inform, encourage, and inspire you every step of the way. When you become an SAA member, you get so many benefits, including the free bi-monthly newsletter Paint, packed with inspiring step-by-step projects, fascinating articles, and detailed information to get your creative juices flowing. Discounts on over 13,000 art products featured on the SAA website and in the Home Shop catalogue, with free order line and free delivery in the UK mainland. A devoted SAA team on hand to answer your questions and give you the confidence and motivation you need to start painting and develop at a pace that suits you. Plus, a free welcome pack filled with gifts and practical help to get you started, as well as the opportunity to make friends with like-minded people.
Best thing of being a member is the inspiration from the magazines, to be able to purchase things at a very reasonable price.
Yeah, you get the reduction on all the materials, the advice you get.
I could shop from home.
It's a community.
It seemed like a very friendly sort of organisation.
If somebody's thinking of joining, don't spend too long thinking. Just join. They'll love it.
And we're back.
Hello and welcome back. So I've had a chance to actually stand back, and you'll see a lot of artists do that. They'll stand back. It just gives you that different view, and you can see the tones and values a little bit better. So I'm going to now just push on with the body. It's a bit wetter. It's getting a bit sticky, but I don't want it overly wet because I want to keep some of that quality. So look how beautifully opaque the predominantly white is. Like I say, to be honest, I've overlooked gouache previously, but every time I do it and I go back to it, I just remember how much actually it's really a lovely medium to work in. So I'm not worried about that at the moment. I can go back in and get everything to fit together. Just using this lovely brush to add texture. So while that's drying, I'm just going to use this to flick on some of the white, which isn't quite there at the moment. So they've got some lovely touches of white here. And you can see I'm using quite a big brush, but just how gently you can use it, you can actually get, oops, too much there. Doesn't matter, I'll go back in. A little bit lighter here. Maybe a bit whiter over here. So the colours of these birds do vary. They go from a very buff brown to a much darker back. And like I say, I just really impressed with the way they work in teams. It's Very interesting concept. Okay, so I'm going to pick up the shape of these longer feathers. Just use the brush just to give you the little details. I really like a medium that you, or a tool which does the work for you, to be honest. Okay.
Anita.
Yes.
Another question for you.
Yes.
Rania would like to know what brushes you can use with it. Whether you need to use watercolour brushes, acrylic brushes.
Yes, you can use any brush, to be honest. It's a water-based medium, so you can use your watercolour brushes, you can use your acrylic brushes, you can use anything. You can use a stick. It's just, a lot of people ask, what brushes do I use with this? And to be honest, the brush you choose is whatever you're trying to achieve. If it works for you, it works. Some mediums have brushes which are more suitable. Again, it doesn't mean that you can't use any brush that you feel comfortable with. But yeah, these are watercolour brushes, but I use these a lot for acrylics because I like the control I get from them. So I'm just going to dab. So again, I've just changed the direction of my brush and just using, if I'd used it this way, I was getting too big a mark. So I just use the edge. I like using a flat brush. It is actually quite versatile. You can get some quite, I want to just distinguish that this is, I'm going to have to go in with a smaller brush there just to get a little bit more of the detail back. Let's have a look. Okay, so I'm just going to tip, not a totally clean brush, in, and I can pick up some of the edges of these longer feathers. Give me a little bit of shape. So what I'm doing is just showing that I have some lot spikier feathers, smaller, softer feathers in the top of the shoulder, but much longer ones starting to come through where the wings are obviously a few speckles. So it's I'm not looking at every detail, I'm not putting everything in the exact same space as I can see it. What I'm doing is thinking and adapting and just seeing what bits seem to work. Okay, so stand back. Okay. Just going in here to the beak because I've added that. So fix it. It's very easy to do. Need to just bring it back in and then just making sure that some of these darker areas fit on so they're not separate. These longer brown feathers do actually come over a little bit. So I need to make a lighter brown. Just bring those back in and that will just get things to fit together a little bit better. Again, I'll stand back. Might have lost that a little bit. Not sure, I think the eye now needs a little bit of work. So while I'm trying to decide what else I need to do, I'm going to give the eye a little bit of a, too much, no, that worked. Again, I'm just keeping my brush quite dry. A few dots. And even just adding a few highlights just brings everything together. And what I'm trying to do is dry off a lot of the colour. I don't want it quite as harsh. I want some reflection. as well as the eye will have be a bit wet, and just if you really focus on something that people really will focus in on, like the eye, and get that right, the rest of it will just come together. So now I'm just going to work myself round with the white and just fix and add tiny details. This is where I normally wouldn't do this. I'd normally just have let the watercolour, even with acrylics, to be honest, I'm not always as controlled, but I just love the feel of the gouache. Okay, so just bring that back. Don't need to fix that too much. A little bit of here, a bit of light. A bit flat in the middle there, so that's easily fixed. It's got some longer feathers here, and you can see just by adding a few touches here and there, without overly working, how it just can come back. I'm going to wet my brush a little bit, it's a bit sticky. Like I say, it's drying quite quickly because I'm not using it overly wet. So let's come in, get things to look like they fit together. Maybe add a tiny line. There. Stand back. And could be overworking and starting to overfiddle. So in my head, I'm going to stop now. I'm going to now. Okay, so like I say, if I have more time or I'm in a quiet environment, I probably would, you know, review, have a look, maybe move a few areas. I just need a little bit more brown here, but on the whole, it works. It's just being able to use wonderful brushes, and actually brushes that you may be a little scared of, especially in quite a detailed piece of work, and be able to put on this beautiful green background. I mean, this is great. For me, I love colour, and to be able to actually put the light colours on a piece of, to be honest, this is off-cut mountboard. It's a piece that, you know, you could throw away or just use to write on, but actually I can use it as part of a painting now. So gouache, it's really moved on. A lot more light fast. The Aquafine range I've found are all of them at least have a 3 light fast rating, right up to a 4, which is excellent or very good. Just exactly what we're looking for in any watercolour range. So new to the Aquafine family, gouache, and I hope you enjoyed that. So join us later in the week for a live workshop with Catherine Inglis.